There would be no explosion. No single moment anyone could point to later and say, that's when it started. Just a flicker. Then darkness. Your phone still shows bars, but nobody picks up. The pumps at the gas station go quiet mid-transaction. Somewhere across town, a grocery store manager watches carts pile up at the register faster than the shelves can be restocked. An intersection that's had a working signal for 30 years suddenly doesn't. And for a moment, nobody quite knows what to do with that. Day 2. The shelves are mostly bare. By the end of the first week, the question on everyone's mind has quietly changed. It's no longer what's happening. It's how long can this go on? Stretch that out. Not a weekend. A full month, with no clear end in sight. So where would the cracks show first? For years, emergency planners and resilience researchers have picked apart exactly this kind of question. Not to predict the future, but to understand which places are built to bend and which ones might break. Geography plays a role. So does infrastructure. So does the simple math of how many people live somewhere and how far their food has to travel to reach them. 6 regions kept surfacing in that research. This is a look at each one and why. Southern Florida on paper, South Florida has it all. Beaches, sunshine, a skyline that keeps growing every year. It's one of the fastest growing corners of the country, and it's easy to see why people keep moving there. But growth like that comes with a quiet dependency. Almost nothing South Florida needs to survive is made there. Food, fuel, medicine, it all arrives by truck day after day from somewhere else entirely. The region simply doesn't produce enough on its own to feed millions of people for any real stretch of time. Cut that flow off for a few weeks, and the math stops working. Then there's the shape of the land itself. Only a few major highways connect the southern tip of Florida to the rest of the country, and even a routine hurricane evacuation is enough to turn them into gridlock, with months of warning and functioning gas stations along the way. Take away the working fuel stops. Take away the traffic control, the emergency crews directing cars through intersections. What's already a slow crawl becomes something closer to a standstill. Hospitals would have to start making hard calls about who gets treated first. Responders would face decisions no training really prepares you for. And local governments, already stretched thin managing a dense, fast-growing population, would be asked to do more with less of everything. It's not a lack of resilience that puts Florida on this list. It's a lack of margin. Florida isn't unique in that sense, though the next region shares the same vulnerability, just at a much larger scale. Southern California, few places on the continent pack in as many people as Southern California does, and few places lean this hard on a system most residents never think twice about. Food, fuel, electricity, water. It all moves through a network so consistent that its presence barely registers. It just works, until it doesn't. Los Angeles alone consumes an almost unbelievable volume of food every single day, kept flowing by an intricate handoff between distribution centers, trucking fleets, freight rail, and the ports that feed all of it. Break that chain for long enough, and the shelves start telling the story on their own. Officials would do what officials generally do in a crisis like this. Funnel whatever's left toward hospitals, first responders, and the handful of systems nobody can afford to lose, which is the right call. It also means everyday households end up much further down the list than they're used to being. Size alone isn't the vulnerability here. It's size paired with a total reliance on logistics that never stop moving, until, hypothetically, they do. Some regions live or die by their supply chains. The next one lives or dies by something even more basic. The desert Southwest Phoenix and Las Vegas shouldn't really exist, not at this scale, not in this climate. They're standing monuments to engineering, cities built where nature never intended cities to be, kept alive by water pulled from hundreds of miles away. That water travels through an elaborate chain of canals, reservoirs and pumping stations before it ever reaches a kitchen faucet. Every link in that chain needs power to run. Take the power away and the pumps stall. Take the fuel away and the crews who'd normally fix that can't get where they're needed. Then the heat arrives because in the desert it always does. Summer temperatures here regularly climb past 100 degrees, and without air conditioning, a home stops being a shelter and starts being a liability. Hospitals would be pulled in two directions at once, treating a surge of heat-related emergencies while working with less power. Less water pressure and less of everything else they rely on. This is a region fighting on two fronts. Not just scarcity, but the climate itself. Weather is one kind of obstacle. Sometimes, though, the terrain alone is enough. The Pacific Northwest for decades. Planners have kept a close eye on the Pacific Northwest, mostly because of what sits beneath it. A seismic fault line, capable of triggering one of the largest earthquakes in American history. But you don't need an earthquake for this region's geography to become a problem. Mountains, dense forest, and long, winding transportation corridors already make moving goods here slower than in most of the country. A blocked highway, a port running behind schedule, a bridge that's no longer safe to cross. Any one of these, sustained for weeks, could leave entire towns waiting far longer than they'd like for help to arrive. The further a community sits from Seattle or Portland, the heavier that isolation becomes. Out here, distance isn't just an inconvenience. It's the difference between a truck showing up this week or not at all. From isolation, we move to the opposite extreme, a region defined by how tightly everything is connected, which, in a crisis, is exactly what makes it so fragile. The Northeast Corridor stretches a line from Washington, D.C. through Philadelphia, New York, and up to Boston, and you've traced one of the densest urban corridors anywhere on the planet. Tens of millions of people live along that line, held together by systems that were never designed to rest. Food arrives on a constant cycle. Electricity moves through a grid so interconnected that a failure in one place can be felt in another hundreds of miles away. Subways and commuter trains shuttle millions of people through their daily routines without most of them giving it a second thought. It's a remarkable machine, right up until one gear slips, and then the strain doesn't stay contained. It spreads. The agencies responsible for this corridor have built some of the most detailed emergency response plans in the country. That's not in question. What's in question is whether any plan, however well built, can hold up when tens of millions of people need help at the same moment. This isn't a region that failed to prepare. It's a region where the scale itself becomes the challenge. Every region so far carries its own weight. The last one carries the weight of nearly everywhere else, too. The Gulf Coast, call it what it is. An industrial artery, not just a coastline. Ports that handle a staggering share of the nation's trade. Refineries that convert crude oil into the fuel that runs the rest of the country. Chemical plants, pipeline networks, shipping terminals, layered together in a way that makes this region function less like a place and more like a piece of critical infrastructure. A huge portion of America's fuel and industrial output either comes from here or moves through here on its way somewhere else. So when the Gulf Coast struggles, the damage doesn't stay put. Less fuel means less trucking capacity. Less trucking means slower food deliveries in places thousands of miles from the coastline itself. Factories that depend on Gulf Coast materials start to feel the pinch. One disruption here doesn't stay isolated. It moves outward, region by region, until it's touched almost everything. That ripple effect is exactly why so many planners rank this corridor above every other region on the list. Its risk was never just local, it was always national. For all the ways a scenario like this can unravel, there's something history keeps proving. Over and over, people show up for each other. Neighbors check on neighbors they've barely spoken to before. Volunteers organize supply runs without being asked. Doctors and nurses keep working shifts that stretch far past what anyone should reasonably expect. First responders keep answering calls, even when the odds aren't in their favor. None of this is meant to predict disaster or to suggest one is coming. It's meant to explain something more useful: why geography, infrastructure, and logistics matter so much when the systems we rely on are pushed to their limit. Real preparedness doesn't start the night the lights go out. It starts long before that, with supplies set aside. A way to reach family if the phones go down, a route out if one's ever needed, and a habit of staying informed through sources worth trusting. None of it is complicated. All of it matters more than people expect, right up until the moment it's the only thing that does. because the communities that hold together under pressure were rarely built in the moment of crisis. They were built in all the ordinary days before it. If this kind of breakdown is something you'd want more of, stick around. There's a lot more ground to cover on preparedness, infrastructure, and the quiet systems holding modern life together. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.